Thank you very much. Let me share my screen with you. And as you will have seen advertised, this is Tony's tour of today's triumphs and tragedies, looking at trade in the time of COVID and taking into account all the Brexit and politics. So strap yourselves in for a quick journey around the world, and please pay careful attention because there will be questions. So either you can message me with them, or you can stop and ask or just shout out the answer, but we'll see as we go through. So this is going to be a whistle-stop tour of the issues, and going to start that by looking at the political landscape in this country and around the world, because it reflects on what can and could and it will happen with Brexit. So there is furious news throughout the media. First question for you: when is a star not a star? When it's a okay. Let me rephrase that. When is a star not a star? It's when it's a. This, of course, refers to the education crisis, and all I can say is it's been a farrago. But why did the government let this happen? Why did they backtrack so quickly? Simple answer is, in my view, is that there are large numbers of kids involved. That isn't good visuals or good politics. All of those kids have parents. So it's a no-win situation. It's literally no-win. And governments do not like no-win situations. It doesn't do them any good. So even though it's the wrong decision, they've decided to backtrack. I can go into why it's a wrong decision, but that's a whole different story. Musical chairs for Diane Mary Harding. Anyone here know who Diane Mary Harding is?
Wife of Mr. Harding.
She is indeed. That's a very, very good guess. She's
Dido
better.
Harding.
Sorry?
She's Dido Harding.
Very good. She is Baroness Dido Harding, and she is the newly appointed head of the National Institute for Health Protection, or NIHP, as we will come to love and know it, which incorporates things like test and trace and PHE and all those other wonderful things. And there's a lot in the paper that all she's ever done is have a disaster at TalkTalk when there were major data leaks, which happened to the best of people. But actually, she's been chairwoman of NHS Improvement since 2017 and was head of NHS Track and Trace and various other things. So she does have some experience. But the most important thing is, this is actually an interim appointment. So they wanted to get it up and running quickly. The Institute will not formally be launched until April next year. So a lot of the stuff in the papers about her is a bit of nonsense, but that's just colour. What can you do? But me no buts and the descent into dictatorship. Anyone know what I'm talking about? It is, of course, our dear Nicola, who has commandeered the airways every day, not only in Scotland, but also across the country, thanks to the BBC. And she's doing it like the best of dictators. She is there with a party political broadcast every single day because she's got nothing left to say about COVID. Now, it may not surprise you with the situation and the polls going the way that they are in Scotland, that our beloved Prime Minister, our Prime Minister, has chosen to holiday in Scotland this year. It's not a secret. Nicola Sturgeon is having an interesting time, but there are major issues that she's facing afoot, not least of which is the Alex Salmond case. So I don't know if anyone noticed, by the way, but me no buts is not a Shakespearean quote. He never wrote it. A lot of people think he did, but he didn't. And the next one, of course, is the elephant in the room. The elephant in the room is immigration. that which we are not supposed to talk about, what's going on. Is it a coincidence at this time that the French are not doing as promised and paid for and stopping immigrants coming across what Christiane would happily call La Manche, or the English Channel? So why are we paying them if, and they just asked for another 30 million, which I understand hasn't been paid because they're not doing what they promised. Also, is it a coincidence that travel restrictions have been placed, disrupting the main tourism month in France by applying restrictions on people returning, causing a lot of people to come back very, very quickly? Apparently, President Macron is spitting feathers. So there's lots of catabasis activity going on in the Channel, not least with our new friendly Marine who's been put in charge of defences, as they're being called, and is in France today to discuss ways of stopping the boats reaching our waters. Of course, the press will have a field day because we should have open borders, but not all of us want open borders. And what's all this about? Why am I mentioning these? What is the relevance of it? It's all about choosing your battles. The government is seemingly giving in. They're not publicising everything they're doing with immigration, particularly in the Channel. There's a lot of legislation to come down the pipe. There's legislation on immigration coming in next month when Parliament gets back that will change the legal framework of what we can and can't do. So choosing your battles, and Sun Tzu's art of war could well have been called the art of politics, because it's being used as a manual by the current government. And some of those battles that are coming, what they're doing is keeping goodwill in the bank. Yes, they've got an 80-seat majority, but when it comes to polemic issues like immigration, like Brexit and the other things, they don't want to lose a single MP from the fold over education. They want to keep them all on board to make sure that they get big wins for the votes that are most important this year to get out of the way quickly. So immigration, Brexit, boundary reform, civil service reform, all of those things are the key things that the government is looking at the moment. And it's not subtle what they're doing. They're saying anything else doesn't matter. But this is key. So August, we all know, is always called the silly season, and the papers will be full of the most nonsense stories. And holidays, vacations and vaccines, what have they got in common apart from the first three letters? Leverage. Leverage is interesting. So the UK has the power to disrupt the economies of our EU neighbours. France, Spain, Portugal, Italy, Greece, and others. Spain was the first, and everyone objected, well, why was it the whole country? One of the reasons why I believe it was the whole country and not just the north of Spain, and why the Balearics were included and why the Canary Islands were included, was because then, when it was applied to the whole of France, it wasn't seen as being discriminatory. Applied to Belgium as well. So all of these things give us political leverage. And the vaccine, the Oxford vaccine, is actually is a world beater. And that's important to us for two reasons. Again, it's leverage. Other parties want it. They have to be nice to us, at least superficially. Of course, we'll sell them anything. But it's also about power and prestige in the world. It's about the UK having the first effective vaccine is about showing that we are still a leading scientific nation and we're getting on with stuff outside of the EU. So all of those things go to this message that actually getting Brexit and getting either a deal or no deal is critical. And all of these aspects immigration is about internal politics. Brexit is about leveraging anything we've got to try and find a way to get the best deal. Another thing that's going on that is very important is this Feed the Nation. They're going to be studying Dishy Rishi's actions for years. So we've had furlough, we've had the self-employed scheme, the second part of which has just opened, by the way, I think today. We've got C-bills, we've got bounce back loans, we've got money pumped into the economy as never before. It's on an unprecedented scale in peacetime, forget wartime. And why do I say it's brilliant economics and even better politics? Apart from the fact that it's the symbolism. So you've got a campaign, Eat Out to Help Out. It's great. It's everyone participating and yet everyone doing what we love to do, which is eating out and drinking out. And it's having a dramatic impact out of all proportion to its cost. And I hear you say, what is its cost? It must be huge. But it's also having a very high impact on national morale and perception. People are going out to eat again. They're going into restaurants again. They're going into, and they think if we can go into a restaurant, we can go into a shop. People are getting the economy back to normal. And if they can go out to eat and they go into a shop, they can go back to work. They can go back to their offices. They can go back to their factories. And a lot of factories, of course, never closed. It's an illusion to think that there was a complete shutdown. There was very far from it. A lot of businesses carried on as before. But this is pump priming that costs almost nothing. So the fact that it costs £10 per person is a complete illusion. And why is it an illusion? So say you're out for a meal and you spend £20 on your meal. £10 of that is paid by the government, yeah? Absolutely. Except out of that £20, £3.33 of it is VAT. So actually the government are only contributing £6.67. They didn't bother mentioning that because it's not £10. But then again, a lot of people are having a drink on top, which isn't covered in the scheme, and they might spend a bit more. So if including your drink, you spent say £30 and the government is paying £10 of that, then the VAT on the £30 is £5. And there's also alcohol duty on the drinks that you have. So actually that £10 is costing less than £5. Except, of course, that in addition, people are being employed. So there's no unemployment benefit. There is PAYE and NIC contributions. There will hopefully be some corporation tax contributions, and it saves jobs. So from a PR point of view, it works. From an economic point of view, it costs almost nothing. And the volumes are very tasty. In the first 2 weeks, 35 million meals were eaten under the scheme. 35 million. That's equivalent of half the population of the UK going out. Now, I know that is, in fact, some people going out frequently, but it makes no difference. It's a significant number of meals being eaten out in just the first 2 weeks. I hear rumours that they're contemplating extending this into September, and certainly the hospitality industry is keen to have that happen because they've got 3 months of absolute silence and quiet to make up for. And from a government point of view, as I've just said, it really isn't going to cost much. So they may well actually do that. So Rishinomics has been one of the great highlights of this, albeit at enormous cost. But one of the best things about it actually has been at very low cost. Next question. We're getting the vapors. Does anyone know what I'm talking about? No.
Are we turning Japanese, Tony?
We are! Brilliant. Thank you very much, Adrian.
You're
We are
welcome.
turning Japanese. The Vapors were the band who had this song. And of course, the turning Japanese is very, very important. And I'll tell you why. But while I'm telling you, let's just think about the life and in the time of Liz. I don't know if you know who Liz is. I do. I don't know who this fella is she's hanging around with all the time, but all I can say is he needs to lose a bit of weight. These were taken a few years ago. I'm not like that anymore. But Liz Truss, she's actually, she's a very good politician. She comes across extremely well. She's very able and extremely personable. And I've met her a few times. And I can say that as a minister, she's been doing well, but now as Secretary of State, she's doing, I think this year she's surpassed herself and her team, and she's got a fantastic in-depth team behind her. In fact, so much so that one of the leading civil servants, Antonia Romero, is being touted as the next head of the civil service to work closely with Boris Johnson. And again, she's a very, very able person. I can tell you that from personal experience. So Japan FTA, it's on track for this autumn. But why are the Japanese so keen and why are they in such a hurry? I'll give you my view. It's all about cars. There are other things, but it's primarily automotive. So the Japanese see the opportunity with our arguments over Brexit and with the possibility of a no-deal Brexit, that the Japanese would have an opportunity to usurp the Germans and the French. Now, bear in mind that we are Germany's second biggest export market for cars after the USA. The UK is a very important market for German automotive industry, and the German automotive industry is enormous, absolutely enormous, and a very important part of the economy. If the Japs, who have a good range of cars, you know, from the Lexus down to all the smaller cars, they can cover a wide range, covering the BMWs and the Mercedes and the Volkswagen, as well as a lot of the French cars with the Citroëns and Peugeots and all the rest of it. They get the chance to usurp the Germans and French. They're going to jump in both feet, and that's what they're doing. It gives them the opportunity to reduce tariffs on components coming into this country and on cars coming into this country. So if they sign the deal, they will immediately have a small price reduction on cars coming into this country. But don't forget, there's an escalator. So whatever the automotive duty is, if you're buying a car, there's then the car duty, which is 8% applied to all new vehicles, and then VAT is applied to all of that. So it's not 20% tax on a car, it's over 30% tax on a car, plus more if it's if they're import duties. So if there is no deal, they get a chance to sell a lot more cars in the UK, which is probably likely, which is one of the reasons why they're back manufacturing at full speed already in the Northeast. Also, the reduction of tariffs on components coming in help mitigate any tariffs on going into Europe. So they see that as a win-win. They will, either way, they'll be better off. If there is a deal on automotive, they still get the reduction in tariffs coming in, and they've shown goodwill. But also, don't get me wrong, there are plenty of other reasons apart from this, but that's the big economy. The Japanese have a very high standard of living. They love haute couture. They buy the top brands, clothing brands from the UK. They buy the top food brands from the UK. I've sold food into Japan extensively, and they're very keen on dealing with the Brits. And the next one, please. Hands up. Oh, come on, this one's an easy one. Go on, Christiane.
Canada.
Tell us. Canada. It's the maple leaf. Correct. Talks had stalled, and that received a lot of publicity because it was negative, etc., etc. But from what I've been told, there have been In Truss We Trust, Liz has had talks with her opposite number in Canada this week. They had 48 hours of intensive talks, and they're now at the point where 95% of the work is done, and it's expected that this is ready for sign-off this autumn. So major breakthroughs being done, because now was the time to apply the pressure for a number of reasons. And you think, so we've got Japan, we've got Canada, not in the bag. USA still has a way to go, and it's going to partly depend on who wins the election, but either way we'll get a deal. It just depends on the shape of the deal. Australia and New Zealand are pretty well ready to go. We've already signed mutual recognition agreements with Australia, New Zealand and the USA. And most people don't know this, but we have a number of agreements, and I can't remember them all, so I have to look at the list. We have signed agreements with Andean countries, CARIFORUM, Central America, Chile, Eastern and Southern Africa, Faroe Islands, Georgia, Iceland, Norway, Israel, Jordan, Kosovo, Lebanon, Liechtenstein, Morocco, Pacific States, Palestinian Authority, Southern Africa Customs Union, and Mozambique, South Korea, Switzerland, Tunisia. And for those of you that don't know what CARIFORUM is, it's a lot of countries that you'd expect us to be able to get a deal with very quickly, because most of them are in the Commonwealth. So Antigua and Barbuda, Barbados, Belize, Bahamas, Dominica, Dominican Republic, Grenada, Guyana, Jamaica, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and Grenadines, Trinidad and Tobago, and Suriname. I'm not going to ask you to repeat the list. Okay, the next one I think is a great pub quiz question. How can 43 people give the UK access to 15% of global GDP? Any answers? Does anyone know? Oh, I love it when you don't know an answer to a pub quiz question. Let me give you another clue. That's the answer. Who's got it yet?
Gibraltar?
No, Gibraltar doesn't look anything like that. Gibraltar has a bloody big rock and a runway that runs into it. So I've been there.
You just got it on the wrong side.
Yeah. No, and it's not an island. Gibraltar is not an island. It's an isthmus, but it's not an island. No, I'll tell you.
Not Richard Branson's island, is it?
No Virgins around.
No.
This is Pitcairn Island in the Pitcairn group. And it's the UK's Pacific territory. So that gives a gateway to the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is better known as the snappily titled CPTPP, which you may have heard things talk about. And there are 11 countries: Australia, Brunei, Canada, Chile, Japan, Malaysia, Mexico, New Zealand, Peru, Singapore, and Vietnam. Now, I've highlighted Australia, Canada, Chile, Japan, and New Zealand because deals are either close or have been done. We have done a deal with Chile, and we've talked about the others. Malaysia, very big economy. Mexico, big economy. So between them, these countries represent 15% of global GDP. It's not trivial. And all of those deals are ready to go. The CPTPP got fame in 2017 because originally it was meant to be 12 countries, and the 12th country was the USA. And beloved President Trump, when he first came in, opted out, saying that he didn't want to do unilateral deals or multilateral deals. He only wanted to do bilateral deals. So he pulled out of it and still has deals with Canada and Mexico and some of the others. But whatever it is, this gives us great access. And why do I say 43 people? Because there are only 43 people live on Pitcairn Island. That's the total population of the group. That's the extent of our Pacific territories. Now, I'd like to tell you that that's a great pub quiz. I also have to be honest and tell you that it's not true.
Where is it near geographically? This is a matter of interest.
It's in the middle of the Pacific.
Closest to Fiji? Samoa?
Not far from Fiji. Not far from Fiji, in that area.
Just in case I see it again.
It's not true because it is not a requirement to be a Pacific nation to be part of the CPTPP. It is a Pacific nation and it is a UK territory, but it's not an actual requirement of the agreement. So let's turn closer to home and see what's going on. And your question, which I'll come back to you in a minute, is where is this building, number one? And number two, why is it known as the Harry Potter building? Sorry. I told you this was just a quiz. So there is a new export strategy coming down the road. They've been very busy. So this builds on the last export strategy, which was launched in 2018 by Rona Fairhead, who's no longer in the department. She retired, Baroness Fairhead. It's an evolutionary development of the last one. The last one was said in some ways to be insubstantive. It wasn't, but it was always intended to be built on. The primary target remains increasing exports up to 35%. Originally, it was from 29% to 35%. Now it's 30% to 35% of GDP. The government wants to export more, and so they should, and I want them to as well, and everyone should want them to. And part of this is that they've set the DIT high-level objectives. Now, you might think, well, didn't they have them before? And I would remind you, this is government. There's also going to be the first ever DIT spending review, and you think, why wasn't I controlling the finances there? Kevin's thinking to himself. They had no budgeting process. Well, they're moving to 3-year budgeting, and this is actually game-changing, and I've had this from quite high up in the DIT. Why was it only 1 year before? Because if you remember, up until 3 years ago, the DIT was called UKTI, and it was part of the Department of Business and didn't have its own budget. Parts of it were in the Foreign Office, and Liam Fox took over the department and coordinated it into one and set it up. And they've been working off 1-year budgets, which means that by November, December every year, at the latest, they've run out of money and they've no idea what they can do for the following year. And contractors didn't know whether they'd be retained, and it was a nightmare, and it just wasn't a good way of doing business. So this is going to give them the opportunity to plan properly. But the other big development, what Boris Johnson talked about a lot, and this has been pronounced very loud to me, again at senior levels from the DIT, is the levelling up agenda. It is not just a slogan. It is a major internal driver, particularly for the regions. So the Northern Powerhouse, Midlands Engine and Southwest have been given 30% extra money this year with the promise of more. 30% is game-changing amount. It is, in government terms, it's unbelievable. So one of the things they're doing is recruiting more ITAs, more international trade advisors, but they are able to do other things as well, and it will make a difference. So the story is watch this space, lots more will be coming down the road. And hot off the press, and this is what I was going to mention before, there is currently, and this is not being publicized anywhere yet because it isn't there, it isn't ready to publicize, but it is going ahead. They're planning a trade mission to Ireland. It may yet have to be virtual because no one knows what's going to happen, but they're trying to make sure it's not. Andy Burnham and Steve Rotherham are being heavily involved in it. This is Northwest, with a view to them helping to lead it as representatives of the Northwest region of the Northern Powerhouse. They're also looking to get support from the local soccer clubs because they want this to be an impressive, big visit to Ireland, because ERA, the Republic of Ireland, is a very important market to the UK, and that is recognised and is being built on. The next one is more action. So on the food and drink side, there's a virtual food and drink virtual mission to the UAE for Gulf food, which is normally a big global event, and it is definitely global. There'll be, first of all, a virtual Meet the Buyer event in November, and then next February, all being well, what they're actually calling a Seal the Deal mission. So DIT and the ITAs and the local representatives in the embassies and so on there will be working on this to get deals, help get deals to the stage where they can be closed by February next year. There is an urgency behind this because Gulf food is so important in the food and drink world that not having the full event is a major draw. Another initiative is the Great British Food Box, which is getting mixed boxes of samples direct to buyers. For companies that want to participate, you can have your food, your samples put in the boxes, and they will be distributed to the buyers direct to the desks of major buyers across the region and across the world. And that's actually a significant major initiative in potentially winning new business. And more. China is still a very important potential market. Obviously, we've all heard about Huawei. Obviously, we've all heard about Wuhan and everything else, but we are not Americans. They may not like what we've done on Huawei, but it's still going ahead, and it's still going ahead at speed, and it's still a major area of focus. And just again in food and drink, and this amused me no end, objectives on food, private label, plant-based, vegan, vegetarian, free from and primary products. Why did this amuse me? Because I've been preaching for 7 years to the UKTI and the DIT about the potential advantages for us in promoting plant-based, vegan, vegetarian, and free from foods, because I manufactured those previously before I sold my business, and they finally taken notice. On the drink side, I think it's hilarious that they see a major export opportunity in English and Welsh sparkling wines. Not so surprising that gin, Paul, Mirage, focus on premium mixers in soft drinks. I wonder who that might interest. But the DIT are there to support it exactly. Jeffrey's mixers. And also beer. Apparently, the UK still makes beer, which is good to know. So, what did I forget? Oh yeah, Brexit. This was a preamble, and don't worry, I'm more than halfway through. Brexit is, to be honest, it's still completely up in the air. It is complex. It is very complex. And if you want a quick one-slide answer to my view on the position with Brexit, this is it. That is my summary as of afternoon of Thursday, the 20th of August, 2020. This is where we are. It's all about the red lines. So there are a lot of issues involved. But for instance, let's take fishing. And fishing is a good one to start with, because today fishing is being discussed between David Frost's team and Michel Barnier's team. Today is fishing day. This is a red line for the UK. And it's an absolute political must, because so much has been mentioned about it. Economically, it doesn't matter. So this again comes down to this choosing your battles. Politically, this is a very important battle. But why is it why does the British government think that it's a winnable battle? Well, first of all, we are not dealing here with the EU 27. We're dealing with the EU 8. There are only 8 EU countries that are involved in fishing in UK territorial waters. The largest, of course, is France. Germany doesn't care. Not in their interest, not involved. Obviously, they want to be united with France because it pays, but actually, they don't care, and it's trivial amounts. So they do not want a deal to fail just because of fishing. However, the French have, and Monsieur Macron have made commitments to their fishermen that this will not stand. The other reason for choosing this battle is because the EU position is unsustainable to anyone with a logical mind. What they're basically saying is, you cannot have control over your own territorial waters. We must retain some control because we've had it for the last years. In other words, refusing to recognize Brexit and that we've left. That's the way that the governments are thinking. The level playing field initiative is far more nuanced, and there's a lot of arguments, but just to give you a couple. They don't want us to break any of the level playing field rules on state subsidies, but they do it all the time. The Germans do it all the time. The French do it all the time. Let me give you one example. The French in theory, get round the state subsidy provisions for, well, they've just done it also with automotive, by investing directly in companies. So one of those is Airbus. And that's led to a massive trade dispute between the EU and the USA because of Airbus and Boeing. Now, both of them, the American government subsidized Boeing on some things, but President Trump is complaining massively about the state subsidies that Airbus is getting. And how does that affect us? Well, yes, we do manufacture some components for it, of course. The wings, very important. But also, the US have imposed very heavy tariffs on some EU products, one of which, amongst many, close to my heart, is whiskey. And it's badly affecting the Scotch whiskey industry because heavy tariffs, I think 40% from memory, have been placed on importing whiskey into the USA. Now, we, of course, have been arguing with the Americans that they should withdraw this because we're leaving. And they say, yeah, but it depends on the deal that you get with the EU. If you agree all these level playing field provisions that they want you to, that'll stay. Another incentive. But all of this comes back to also a political cost. And one of the political costs would be that if we were to accede to EU demands in full on the level playing field, it would affect a levelling up agenda. Now, the levelling up agenda is a major political agenda for Boris Johnson, because that's how he won the Red Wall's the Red Wall seats, and he doesn't want to lose them. So it's a matter of choosing the battles, as I said before, of things that matter. And this is another one that matters. This is an area where there can be compromise. Of course there can be compromise, but the compromise has to be fairly strict. David Frost has been very clear the whole way through and will be very clear today. His mandate is very, very clear. He is not to give away too much. He's allowed to compromise. And part of the issue also for David Frost in negotiating with Barnier is that Barnier has no real mandate to negotiate. And I don't think this is widely enough recognized in this country. He's boxed in by 28 separate agendas. The 28 EU countries all came with their own wish lists. And so he's more about sound and fury than he is reality, because he isn't in a position to compromise. He's not allowed to. That needs to be political. So are there reasons to conclude that we'll have a deal or no deal? Something is going to happen soon. Yes, this week there have been negotiations. Yes, there's been progress. Yes, the vast majority of areas have been tied up and agreed. There are still these red lines, and it's how those are treated. And at the end of the day, that's not a negotiation for the teams. That's very much a political negotiations, and it's going to come down to the special meeting that the EU will have, and a meeting, etc., etc., etc. It'll go around a few more circles, but David Frost has a new job next month, and you might say, well, hang on, he's got to finish off this one first. But of course, his new job as National Security Advisor is actually incredibly important. That isn't the only reason, of course. Also, the government has promised business a minimum of 3 months to prepare. So the final decision has to be taken by the end of September, which is not far away. There's a political cost of no deal. Of course, there's a political cost of no deal, but the government's calculations at the moment are that the cost of no deal has reduced dramatically during this year, partly because of COVID, but for other reasons as well. So what they've been doing is choosing the battles that they're going to fight, keeping their friends very, very close. And if all of this goes wrong, it leads to an Australia deal, as Boris Johnson keeps saying, which to everyone else is a WTO deal or no deal. So one of the things to bear in mind about no deal is that no deal doesn't mean no deal. First of all, not all of our current WTO-based trade has tariffs. People don't understand that. They assume there are high tariffs on everything. Number one, the vast majority of WTO deals have low tariffs and some have zero tariffs. Even if we have no deal, because of WTO rules, there would not be tariffs on everything we buy or sell to the EU. You don't need a free trade agreement to trade. So the UK's biggest export market, representing 18% of our exports, is the USA, where there is no free trade agreement at the moment. Only about half of our trade, just over half of our export sales, are done under free trade agreements, and that's a single market or free trade agreements. So that's deals, sales to the EU and sales to areas and countries that the EU has trade agreements with. It's just over 50%. I think 50, 55, 56%, something like that. So all of that, you don't have to have these. So everyone thinks the world is going to come to an end on the 31st of December if we don't have a deal. Very far from it. Most of our trade with the EU will continue, and there'll be some inconveniences, and everyone will get over it and get on with it. And within 3 months, no one will remember why they ever thought there was a problem. And that applies to Ireland as much as it does to the South Coast. Another reason, if you want to export, there is lots of help available and it's growing. The DIT, as I said, are there, chambers of commerce, other organizations are there, even BITA are prepared to help you, and lots of commercial organizations are there. It's easier than you think. There is this mystique about exporting and people don't understand what exporting is. So I came up with my own definition of exporting. Exporting is selling. That's it. So if you're in any organization that does any selling, then you're probably capable of exporting. Now, obviously, if you've got an Airbnb in Blackpool, or you're a hairdresser, no, you're not likely to be exporting. But a lot of small and cottage industries are doing absolutely phenomenal trade. I mean, there's one food shop in the Lake District that has multiplied their trade 5-fold simply by getting on the internet and exporting. They're getting orders all the time from America and Europe and so on. It's much easier than people imagine. And then finally, I'm going to leave you with 3 secrets of selling in export markets, and they apply to services and they apply at home as well. It's just 3 secrets of selling, because exporting is no more than selling. And they are: have the right product at the right price in the right place. And if you do that, you'll always find a market. So thank you all very much for listening, and happy to deal with any questions you might have.